it's important for parents to know the truth and to know what's happening to their children.
It's illegal for us to reveal this mother's identity, her children, or where they live. We're meeting in a public place to go through documents about an ordeal in 2022 that shattered her life.
No one was doing their jobs. It was me at the end of the day who had to go and contact police. A year prior, I'd been teaching him body safety and abuse prevention, and that's, at the end of the day, what saved him. I was picking my son up from childcare, and then he mentioned that his daycare worker had touched him on the penis.
This vision has never been seen by the public. It captures a rare and harrowing moment when her 4-year-old tells her what happened to him that day.
Yeah, his name is Ali.
And what did you say he was doing? You can tell me.
He pinched me in the do. That's all he done.
When you were doing a wee?
No. When I was staying close to him, he pinched my do. And he was doing that to some of the other boys, and he was being mean to all of us. And he also makes some of us cry. He makes me cry.
Have you got your pants on or up? Is it when your pants are just normal? On?
I think on.
Okay.
It just makes me feel sad.
Makes you feel sad?
Yeah, it makes me not have a good day. I don't want to die.
Muhammad Ali was found guilty of indecently touching her son. He's currently serving an 18-month sentence. Court documents reveal prior to joining the centre, he was unemployed twice due to drug use.
They're desperate for staff and they're not doing their checks.
Yeah. And the centre never said anything?
The childcare never told any of the parents whose children were in direct care of the sex offender. And I get that some parents are like, oh, well, it would never happen to me, but how do you know it hasn't happened already? You wouldn't know, because they don't tell you. Everything's a secret, and they don't care about your kids. They're there to make money, and that's the bottom line. They're there to make money.
When it comes to sexual misconduct and offences, at least one a day is reported in Victorian, WA and New South Wales childcare centres. In Queensland, Northern Territory and South Australia, there is no reportable conduct scheme. Her son endured a gruelling cross-examination in court, triggering anxiety attacks.
I didn't even know that they were going to be cross-examined. If we had not gone through the court case, he could have easily gone to New South Wales. He could have gone to any other state and started working with children again.
Muhammad Ali is due for release from prison in May.
This year, my son randomly came up to me and told me that he was doing it to him every single day at childcare, and my son was going there full time.
In this 1-hour special, the devastating reality of Australia's childcare crisis, we reveal systemic failures and the catastrophic impact of putting profit before care. And with regulation of this $20 billion sector in tatters, families are paying the ultimate price. When we see footage like this and this, the narrative is the same. They are the exception. But the evidence tells a different story. We've analysed the data and found a disturbing surge in serious incidents, more than 26,000 cases in 2024, a 27% jump in 3 years. Every day, at least 7 children go missing or are locked out of centres, a 49% increase in 3 years. and more than 3,000 babies and toddlers are sent to hospital each year with injuries sustained in childcare. Almost 1.5 million children are enrolled in childcare. Parents trust they will be safe. But some centres are not what they seem.
It was all pretense, it was all fake. I would say it's the house of horrors and the people in it are the devil as far as I'm concerned.
It's really horrific what people do when they don't think anyone's watching.
The industry has been in crisis for a very long time.
So they see a child, what do they see? $signs.
I want the public to know the reality of childcare, know exactly what they're actually putting their children into.
Childcare is underpinned by billions in government subsidies. The sector is now dominated by private operators, listed companies and private equity, where profit often trumps care.
Managers who were once passionate educators are now business managers who are worried about profit and loss. It's no longer about community or education, it's business.
Whistleblowers, industry insiders and parents are breaking their silence. They're lifting the lid on a sector in urgent need of reform.
These big companies came into childcare and started preying on our children, and I don't think any of us knew that that's what was going on.
This is not the image of childcare you'd expect. Affinity Education is one of Australia's largest private chains. It's owned by private equity. Top performers are celebrated and staff are playfully dubbed freaks at lavish parties. In regional Victoria, the Tia Loveday was a top performer, passionate about childcare until she spent time at Affinity.
As a centre manager, I would leave my house in the morning with a pit in my stomach and I'd take an extra change of clothes with me because 9 times out of 10 in my hour drive to work, I'd throw up on myself. I'd get to work, I'd clean myself up, literally listen to pump up music the whole drive in so I could get ready to lead my team the right way. But it was killing me inside.
Affinity operates more than 250 centres nationwide. Latia says its strict financial targets and incentives drive managers to prioritise profit over care.
So the amount of staff that we could put on had to be bare minimum. We had occupancy, wage targets, so labour targets, revenue and profit targets.
And so did you get bonuses if you met the targets?
Yep, so as a centre director I have received incentives into my paycheck. So if you didn't meet those targets, you could be placed into like intensive groups and you weren't actually achieving anything that was actually quality or a part of your job scope in order to meet these KPIs for them to build profit. On those days when staff were away, I as a centre manager would obviously pick up the slack.
So you were doing how many jobs?
At a time, 4 to 5. There was a point there where I was having to cook meals in a storeroom so I could still supervise children at the same time just so they could eat.
So would you say with Affinity, the kids weren't put at the centre of things?
Absolutely not. No.
What was at the centre of it?
Profit, at all times. This is a culture that is built into for-profit services. To climb that ladder, you have to meet that culture. If you don't, you're not going to succeed. Unfortunately for me, there was a lot of times that I have met that culture, which is why I was able to climb that ladder. And then I took a real hard, realistic look at myself and said, I can't do this anymore.
Shay Carter had a similar experience working as a centre manager at Affinity, first in Sydney, then in Canberra.
So what toll did it take on you working at Affinity?
I tried to end my life.
That bad?
Yeah.
What sort of targets did you have?
So we had occupancy targets. Every week we had a certain number we had to reach. Casual bookings, so all financial business targets.
It's more than just targets. There's been almost 1,900 breaches at New South Wales Affinity centres during the last 4 years, according to the New South Wales Department of Education. Affinity says it's more like 1,700 breaches. Parents and insiders told Four Corners they witnessed some shocking incidents.
A child got given the wrong formula and ended up in hospital.
My son is non-verbal. Turned out he fractured his ankle. The centre told me they didn't notice.
They tell you they're cooking slow-cooked lamb tagine. You go in and it's 2-minute noodles in bulk.
There were times I would walk into a room and there was one educator to 21 children. It was like a zoo.
One of Affinity's most troubled centres is Spring Farm in Sydney's southwest. It racked up a staggering 20 breaches last year, including for inappropriate discipline and injuries.
Does it surprise you that they're that bad?
If you know anything about private equity, it's not that surprising. They take over services in order to squeeze as much profit out of them as possible. They're leaving just the worst places behind that you would ever want to send your child.
What does that say to you?
It seems that it doesn't matter how much you underperform, how many breaches you have. The regulator is really happy to continue to give you exemptions, to allow you to open new services. The government's happy to give you grant money.
Australia's childcare industry is meant to be tightly regulated, but the system is failing. At the national level, ASIQA sets the standards, but it doesn't enforce them. That job falls to state and territory regulators. Each state decides how to inspect, investigate and penalise childcare providers, and enforcement is inconsistent. Inspections of centres are infrequent, and some haven't been rated for 9 years. States can issue fines for breaches or let violations slide. Even when serious breaches are found, some centres aren't shut down, even temporarily. With no uniform system and weak enforcement, children's safety is at risk.
Do you think there's much under-reporting by educators and providers to the regulator?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it the law for them to actually notify?
Yes, but educators are afraid.
Why?
Because they're afraid they'll lose their job. You learn to keep quiet.
Former Affinity worker Joanna Hugo reported misconduct but says she was ignored. A child's family complaint finally sparked an investigation.
Thank you, Joanna.
Four Corners obtained a recording of her October meeting with the regulator.
Do you understand that everything we are saying in this conversation is being recorded on this audio recorder?
Yes.
Joanna details an educator inciting children to spit and hit a child.
She told the children, everyone hit Alex, and then everyone spit on Alex, and he was screaming. and then the children did hit him, and he was screaming, and there was like more or less 20 children sitting there, and they all like got up onto their knees and they smacked him.
Joanna says her colleague then restrained the child.
She basically kind of kneeled over him like hands and legs to try and stop him from moving and calming down.
The educator left. Joanna was fired 3 weeks after speaking to the regulator. Affinity told us safety is a priority for the 22,000 children they look after. They say they're committed to upholding the highest standards in all aspects of their operations. They're working with the regulator to improve systems and processes at Spring Farm. And in the case of Joanna Hugo, the company says it terminated her over performance issues.
The thing that frightens me most is how uninterested governments are in this problem. They throw enormous amounts of money into childcare, enormous amounts of money are going to private businesses that ultimately are not mainly focused on meeting the needs of the vulnerable people that they are being commissioned to look after and support and educate.
Professor Gabrielle Marr has studied privatised social service systems for decades. She's worried about the trend in childcare.
So every year, about 300 or 400 new childcare centres open, and of them, about 95% or so are for-profit centres. We can see that all...
She says for-profit operators now dominate, running nearly 3/4 of long daycare centres.
And I think people would be very surprised to see how many real estate brokers, property developers and investment bankers are looking to make big money in the childcare sector.
Billions of dollars in government subsidies are fueling the private sector boom. Operators can get away with charging more than $200 a day per child, or $1,000 a week.
Providers are allowed to charge whatever fees they like, and large for-profit providers charge higher fees than large not-for-profit providers, for example, while also spending less on their staff. So basically, the whole industry is massively underpinned by a secure and growing stream of government income, which makes it pretty attractive.
Professor Marr says families should be concerned and cites landmark research from the ACCC showing large for-profit providers are more likely to deliver lower quality services compared to community and non-profit services.
There is a mountain of evidence that large for-profit providers deliver, on average, lower quality services. They have more part-time and casual staff, they pay lower wages, they have higher turnover. It adds up to a whole picture of a misalignment of incentives between the public purpose and families and children's needs and the goals of these organisations.
Childcare consultant and former early learning educator Shay Carter has studied all states and believes New South Wales is the worst when it comes to transparency.
In comparison to the other states, there's not enough information.
So are you saying that parents are essentially in the dark?
Yeah, absolutely.
If the public had even the slightest idea of how horrendous these incidents are in a lot of these centres, there would be an absolute uproar. And they don't want to have to deal with that. They don't want to have to deal with the angry parents wanting to know why they weren't told earlier that these things were happening at the places they're leaving their children.
New South Wales Greens politician Abigail Boyd has been working with Four Corners for the last 6 months. The former corporate lawyer is helping us expose what's really going on inside childcare.
What's the biggest revelation to you?
Just how much is being kept a secret. This is not just a whole sector that wants to hide this from the public. It's also the regulator. It's the government that are pumping so much money into this sector. Nobody wants people to know what's actually going on.
To understand what's really going on, we needed to dig into the scale of the breaches and how the regulator was responding. In November, Boyd invoked an SO52. It's a powerful parliamentary order to release secret departmental documents.
I asked for all of the documents from the regulator in relation to particular service providers so that I could have a look at what action the regulator was taking in response to breaches of the national law. I'd set aside some time to talk about that.
She says the New South Wales government and the department fought hard to block their public release.
The worst thing is, they have said to me now numerous times that even by asking for these documents, I'm putting children at risk because the regulator will somehow be distracted from their core function by me just simply asking for them to be transparent and accountable.
In December, she gained access to a fraction of the documents, but they were placed under privilege, blocking Four Corners and the public from accessing most of them.
I had this deep pit, this feeling in my stomach of just revulsion and horror. And this is just a smidgen of what we would get if we were to have all of the documents. This is, literally 1,000th of what I asked for.
So what sort of things did you discover?
So I can't tell you details because of the way that they have covered this up, and I'm yet to have those documents released. But I can speak in general terms, and I can tell you that there were multiple reports of inappropriate sexual touching, multiple reports of educators treating children really roughly, lots of broken elbows, broken wrists, kids being kicked, a lot of kids being verbally abused, yelled at, and a lot of, unfortunately, inappropriate restraint, force feeding, forcing children to go to sleep, putting pillows over their heads. And this is just one tiny amount. This is just one little snapshot of what is going on in these centres. It's not normal.
The New South Wales government recently launched an inquiry into childcare and the effectiveness of the regulator. Do you think that would have happened without your request for the documents?
I know it wouldn't have happened without the request for the documents.
The Education Department told us it's complying with the SO52.
Good morning, Deputy Premier. Good morning, officials. Nice to see you.
The New South Wales Minister for Early Learning, Prue Carr, was unavailable for an interview with Four Corners. In a statement, she said she launched the inquiry to make sure the rise in breaches was due to a crackdown in enforcement rather than a rise in serious systemic concerns. A few documents from the department were made public. That's how we tracked down Din Trang. From the outside, it looks like a house. Until you go inside and see it's a childcare centre without children. It was closed by regulators in July last year, after a decade of breaches. The owner of 3 bears, Din Trang, dubbed Captain by staff, moved into the childcare industry in 2010.
We opened on 2010, and this room is the baby room. All the furniture.
For years, the New South Wales regulator failed to act as Trang amassed hundreds of breaches, over-enrolling, shuffling kids to evade inspections, and allegedly leaving them in a van for 3 hours without water to avoid authorities. He agreed to speak, denying all allegations.
Not true at all. Another false allegation. It's a minibus. It's fully equipped, and it's not a van, it's a minibus. And it's comfortable for the children.
I think the allegation was not the quality of the van, but that kids were hidden in the van to hide them from the regulator.
That's not true.
Did the children go in the van for any reason?
No, that's for excursion. We take a lot of excursion for the children. Normally we take up to 3 times per week.
Where did you take them on excursions?
Library, shopping centre, post office, and park.
Despite repeated breaches and emergency action notices over child safety concerns, Trang remained in operation in 2023. Serious injuries, such as fractured elbows and hands, went unreported and untreated. By September 2023, the failures escalated. A child suffered a knee injury that required surgery, and the family had to call an ambulance. Texts reveal a culture of coercion. Staff were rewarded for over-enrolling and threatened with pay cuts if numbers didn't rise. Messages show Trang warning staff if the Department of Education visited the services and children were not transported, there will be death on the whole group. Another says, one more complaint from parents or one more child pulling out, staff would be terminated.
Definitely untrue. Definitely not true at all.
Trang fought to stay open, taking the case to a New South Wales tribunal, NCAT, but lost. The tribunal found Trang had a tendency to incorrectly state the truth. He claims he's the victim of a conspiracy led by parents. And you're suggesting that they then turned on you?
Yes.
As well as some staff turned on you?
Correct. Yeah.
And the Department of Education turned on you?
Yep.
And the tribunal?
Correct.
Despite his track record, Trang is pushing to reopen.
The teacher all want to come back. They love Childcare, and we are one of the top operators, top performers in the area.
The New South Wales Department of Education told us the regulator visited over 8,500 services last year, resulting in more than 19,000 breaches. It says children's health and well-being is its top priority, and it does not hesitate to prohibit individuals from the sector for serious matters. For the past 6 months, we've been investigating how the industry got to this point. Using the largest source of archive material in the country, we've gone back to when the industry took off in the 1980s. Major problems were evident back then: wage underpayment and quality issues. Sadly, it's only gotten worse. And the industry is only as good as its workers.
I don't think people know what's going on, and I think there's some sort of motivated ignorance on behalf of the government. They are throwing money at it, no doubt about it, and I think it's a bit of a false economy. It's a kind of lazy policy. It's easy to let the private sector roll it out, and they haven't paid enough attention to the problems that brings.
The Federal Minister, Anne Alley, was unavailable for an interview, but told us the government is working with all jurisdictions to ensure child safety. Childcare workers have long been undervalued and underpaid. with wages the biggest expense due to mandatory staff-to-child ratio requirements. Some centres cut corners. In 2020, the billion-dollar listed childcare giant G8 self-reported that 27,000 workers had been underpaid up to $80 million. 5 years on, it's still being investigated. Childcare consultant Shay Carter hears stories from workers daily through her social media account.
Is there much wage underpayment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a vicious cycle. There's a reason that we're all leaving.
The Genius Childcare Group is the latest offender, with centres suddenly closing, leaving families and workers in limbo.
When I found out the educators weren't getting paid, it really upset me because I don't know where my money's going to. It's clearly not going to the educators, it's not going to their super, which it should. It's not going to the food, it's not going to the nappies and essentials. Where is the money?
Since early 2023, Genius has routinely withheld wages, super, and even rent. Yet regulators kept allowing it to acquire and open new centres. It has 28, with 17 advertised as opening soon. Hundreds of Genius workers around the country are owed an estimated $7 million in unpaid super. Former Genius manager Nicole Skoda is one of them.
I believe Genius is probably one of the worst employers anyone could have. I had educators working week to week and they needed to pay rent and they couldn't because of the fact that their pay was late.
Other bills weren't being paid.
The power bill went unpaid months at a time until the final cut-off notice was being sent. We were cut off from suppliers for nappies, wipes, cleaning chemicals, laundry detergent, sanitisers. But unfortunately, when you're a company that doesn't pay your educators, you can't employ those really high-quality staff. Just get anyone in the door.
Why have you decided to...
Jenny Shee enrolled her child in 2023. Standards at the centre in Reservoir, Melbourne, deteriorated before her eyes. Despite charging Jenny $140 a day, or $700 a week per child, Genius fell short on quality. The cost-cutting ran deep.
You noticed there was a lot of staff turnover. Did that concern you?
Absolutely. It takes a long time for a child to connect with the educator. But because of the high turnover, you would see new faces all the time. I just realised I can't stay here. And yeah, it was very hard.
Cleaning contractor Doug Sinclair has delayed his retirement because of Genius.
They got to over 40k behind.
And Doug, you cleaned Reservoir. What happened?
We cleaned it originally and then we stopped it because lack of payment. We stopped a few centres and even their head office.
Genius is owned by entrepreneur Darren Mosquito, who also owns 30% of listed childcare group Mayfield. Doug cleaned Mosquito's mansion in Toorak.
It's huge, 2-storey, lots of bedrooms, lots of bathrooms.
And his luxury holiday home.
My wife and I personally cleaned his holiday house down at Flinders, and I know that just recently sold last year for $14.3 million. So where's the money gone?
They get away with it because they can. Good educators have left the industry because of Genius and the way that they have been treated.
Childcare is bleeding staff, leaving a gaping hole in a system already 21,000 workers short.
The bottom line to that is that quality has to suffer if you don't invest in your staff.
Burnout, low pay and exploitation are driving staff out of this industry. And another disturbing fact we found, the people looking after your kids might not even be properly qualified or trained.
You have one new message.
Hi, it's Daryl. Ashley here. I've given it to more thought and I'd love to speak with you. Children deserve better. Families deserve better. Thanks. Bye.
Ashley Sy has worked at more than 25 childcare centres as a casual employee and wants to quit.
I've sort of seen the ugly side of it. People putting profits before children.
With a 4-year early childhood degree, she's seen quality decline as centres hire underqualified staff to cut costs.
I've worked with people who didn't know the basics. I've worked with somebody who didn't know how to properly put a nappy on. And now Australia has seen this sort of understaffing, and they've said yes to people from overseas coming to fill this. And now it's sort of just like a house of cards.
She's witnessed international students getting exploited and says it's undermining childcare.
If the centre does something appalling and you're being sponsored by them, that power dynamic, you're not going to report it because then you'd be deported from the country. I reckon there is way more offences that people have not reported than they have.
Childcare workers are among the nation's lowest paid professionals, even with the recent government wage subsidy, a 15% increase spread over 2 years.
I did a little bit of digging actually. People that work in car parks get paid more than us. Yeah.
The pay's disgusting. We are glorified babysitters. We are not treated as professionals. We are not treated as people who know what they're doing. We are a means to make an end, unfortunately.
Some centres cut corners to fill staffing gaps and keep a lid on wage costs.
We need to keep our doors open to be able to pull those profits in, so we're filling it with educators who are working towards qualifications, educators who are unqualified.
Some centres have employed staff with fake qualifications.
I've also been aware of educators who have just paid a $6,000 fee and have had a qualification handed over to them.
So, fake certificate?
Essentially, yep.
Sometimes students don't go to college at all, but they still get the outcome. They're now working in sectors like childcare, looking after Australians' children. That's alarming.
Mark Glasbrook has been running an immigration agency for 27 years. He says childcare is an increasingly popular pathway for visa applications. Australia's $7 billion private college sector is booming. Some colleges are churning out childcare workers in weeks or months through fast-track courses. Some are coming from overseas. Glasbrook believes that 1 in 3 international applicants aren't genuine. So from a childcare industry point of view, what sort of impact are we talking?
There may be people that are currently in Australia working in childcare who have a qualification who are not up to industry standards.
The Australian Skills Quality Authority, ASQA, recently revoked over 21,000 fake qualifications from 4 private colleges, including nearly 2,000 childcare certificates issued to domestic and international students. Did that surprise you?
No. No, unfortunately that doesn't surprise me at all.
ASQA is investigating 8 cases of potential childcare training fraud. It is part of a broader probe into 138 college providers, 29 of which are registered to offer childcare courses.
separate bowl.
Some centres take pride in food. Others don't. We've found food budgets as low as 33 cents per meal per child. Barely enough for proper nutrition. Pasta with ketchup, white bread and jam, instant noodles. Nutritious food is vital for kids. 90% of brain development happens in the first 5 years of life.
But there are some services who don't view the food as part of their service. Their budget's to like 50 cents to $1 per child per day.
For 4 meals a day. So if you work that out, it's roughly about 42 cents per meal per child. And I have also shown families kitchen menus knowing damn well we don't actually serve that.
In stark contrast, at this community centre in Mount Gambier, which isn't focused on profit, food is a priority. With a budget of $6.50 a day per child.
This is reminding me very much of the stories we heard out of aged care. When you get operators coming in and cutting costs and serving up meals to people who can't complain, sounds like exploitation. What can you even get for 33 cents?
Very few people understand how the childcare industry really works. I mean, for one, it's the only educational institute that we call an industry. We don't call it the primary school industry or the high school industry.
Caitlin Paltridge works at the community centre run by a board of parents. She fears the growing grip of private operators is compromising quality as they focus on the bottom line.
Good job. When you're talking about corporate childcare, they're only making decisions that are going to improve their bottom line. And it feels like no one's really taking the time to address the real issue here, and that issue is that the children don't have access to quality care anymore.
High quality childcare isn't cheap. All centres are meant to have a rating. Not all do.
The rating system is a joke. And there's also this really stupid term of working towards. That is a failure to meet the minimum standards expected under the national law. They're just allowed to continue year after year without ever meeting standards. It's about creating this viable industry. And then we just chuck these ratings on the top and pretend that there's some sort of, actual accountability or scrutiny going on.
So I looked at the data. 1 in 10 services doesn't have a rating.
So are we talking a handful or dozens?
That's like 1 in 10 centres. Like 10% of all centres don't have any quality rating. And most of those are for profit. There's emerging chains that are growing rapidly, some of which are allowed to keep opening centres, even though they might have some of their centres working towards the quality standards.
Working towards means they don't meet quality rating standards. We've uncovered that up to 47,000 kids are registered in for-profit long-day care centres that don't meet national quality standards, compared to 8,500 in non-profit centres. Only 14% of for-profit centres exceed the national quality standards, while non-profits are more than double that rate. Ashley Sy says she worked at a centre that was rated exceeding the standards. But behind closed doors, some of its practices fell far short.
If a child was naughty, they would be strapped into chairs, into these high chairs with the straps going across their bodies and the tables in front, as a means to restrain them. And It was just appalling to see.
Ratings are about money and image. Centres use it to attract families and justify the fees. And some use it in marketing to get a higher price when they sell it.
There are materials that children can't use on a day-to-day basis that are kept in staff rooms that are only brought out for assessment and rating time.
The boom is on to buy and sell. In this ad, a brothel and childcare centre are listed side by side. Just 2 more investment opportunities.
The first is a tenanted brothel in Oakley, and the second is a tenanted childcare centre in Sunbury.
Caring for kids is highly lucrative.
Have you ever thought about buying a childcare centre? Are they a good investment? We think so.
Children aren't just enrolled, they come with a price tag, sometimes as high as $300,000, pushing some centres' values into the millions. Some ads even say no experience necessary.
It's quite fascinating to see how many men are interested in setting up childcare companies that are basically staffed to 98% by women, the large majority of which don't earn much money.
Childcare is attracting the wrong type of people. If you want to understand what's wrong with early learning in Australia, Jumpstart says it all. This promotional video paints a warm, welcoming image, central to the branding by the owner's wife, Sally Fanous.
At Kids Kinder and Jumpstart Childcare Centres, we operate with the philosophy that each child will learn in a different way and at a different pace.
This mother, who we will call Jane, sent her child to one of Jumpstart Education's 5 centres in New South Wales.
So my son was 3 when he started. He was developmentally the age of maybe an 18-month-old, and he was nonverbal.
We can't identify you because of a court order. How do you feel about that?
I want my face seen. I want people to see my face and understand that this is the face of someone whose child has experienced something they shouldn't have experienced, whose trust has been completely broken.
This is the first time Jane is talking about what happened.
I don't want any parent to ever go through what I went through or what we're going through.
Like many childcare centres, Jane was frequently sent photos of her son eating, playing and learning.
It was all fake.
How would you describe it?
Oh, I would say it's the house of horrors and the people in it are the devil as far as I'm concerned. They did not protect my son. They picked a vulnerable child who could not talk, who could not communicate, who could not share how scared he would have been or how upsetting it was, and they broke a trust that I will never get back, and that has impacted our family beyond words.
What was happening?
Various things.
Amara Giroudi looked after Jane's son. 7 children, including Jane's son, were subjected to rough and brutal conduct between April and October 2021, according to court documents. Other kids were left exposed to hazards. You've got children who are strapped into high chairs for 3 to 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
5 days a week for months upon months.
There's no way they didn't know about it. The children were being forced into high chairs beyond mealtime for hours and hours of time. In my son's case, he was strapped down with a rope into the high chair because he was too strong and could get out.
At times, for educator Amara Giroudi's amusement, he was splashed with water while strapped in a high chair.
The other children were also being harmed. She was pinching children, holding their arms behind their back in a restrictive pose.
A 2-year-old girl was picked up by the arm and leg and slammed onto a bench, Giroudi's hand stifling her screams.
and force-fed till they vomit, which I can't comprehend as an adult doing that to someone.
After being force-fed, Juruti and another educator put a 3-year-old autistic boy's head into a garbage bin when he vomited.
You can't hide that in a daycare centre with other staff. I can't comprehend it. And no one said anything. And no one else did anything. They hid it so well, and they duped all of us, and they broke all of our trust. My son has permanent marks on his buttocks that I could never work out where he got them from, and the doctor can't either. And that's because he was sitting there for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Jumpstart was plagued by widespread failures.
Staff members in there were under the age of being able to properly work, or that they were not fully trained correctly. You know, where's your working with children check? Where's your first aid? Where's your CPR? If something had happened to one of those children and they choked, and you've got someone there who has no idea how to do CPR, and none of the staff do, what are you going to do? You know, that child's going to potentially die. There should be more.
Until the 5 centres closed in 2022, they helped fund the lifestyle of owner Thomas Fanous and his wife Sally. Amara Juruti and the company pleaded guilty to multiple charges. Last July, the company was fined just over $186,000, including $8,280 for force-feeding a child. Juruti was convicted of 7 offences and fined under $40,000.
Which in itself is a joke. Children being abused and having trauma for the rest of their lives, that's what it's worth. As a parent, if I was to do that to my son and had it reported, I would lose my son. I would be considered an unfit parent.
Thomas Fanous operated childcare centres for almost a decade, and during that time, none of the centres ever met minimum quality ratings.
You've got a service that the regulator knew wasn't meeting standards and had never met standards. You then get these children suffering this intense abuse. And is it any wonder the regulator doesn't want us to know about this stuff?
Corporate documents show that Thomas and Sally Fanous left childcare and moved into NDIS.
I was so upset. My son is an NDIS recipient.
I tracked down Thomas Fanous at his new business.
It's Adele Ferguson from Four Corners.
Right.
I've been looking into Jumpstart, and I've got some questions for you. Would you like to... Jumpstart.
You need to leave.
Sorry. We've spoken to a mother whose son had disabilities. We've got some questions.
You destroyed something in my child that I will never get back, he will never get back. You destroyed something in all those children.
I'll get them organised.
As the childcare crisis deepens, its structural failures can no longer be ignored. There are good centres and good educators, but finding good quality care is getting harder.
We're fighting a constant uphill battle. It feels like nothing is ever going to change the way that things are going.
I don't think the sector's going in the right direction. And if the government's going to be pouring a whole lot more money in, they need to correct the course from the current course. The Prime Minister has stood up and talked about the problem of profiteering in aged care and Lamborghini driving aged care providers and so on, and without seeming to realise that there are similar issues in childcare as well.
What is that?
More money won't fix this mess.
there needs to be a change. The children deserve a better education, and the families deserve it too, and the teachers deserve better working conditions.
How urgent is change needed?
Oh, yes, it needs to be done yesterday. Yeah.
I think we absolutely have to have some form of royal commission, public inquiries, where people can come and tell their stories. I want to know what's happening in these places, because I don't think I'm alone in assuming that my kids would be looked after when I drop them off at childcare.
If this program has raised concerns for you, you can contact one of these services.